Hey, everybody. This is the one, Greg Gutfeld. Very excited over this guest. He is a giant in media analysis. And I thought, you know what? He often analyzes the media. So what if I analyze the media that is analyzing the media, and then this podcast could be picked up by somebody else who analyzes that from a media perspective, and it could create this never-ending cycle of media analysis. Let me give you some background on Howard Kurtz. He hosts Fox News Channel's Media Buzz, a great show, Sundays at 11 a.m. I watch it in my pajamas while drinking coffee. My pajamas, it's more like a shorty robe. But he has quite a pedigree. He's a veteran journalist, a renowned media reporter. He used to work at CNN. We don't hold that against him. He did a show called Reliable Sources back when it was good. He was a bureau chief of the Daily Beast. He worked at Newsweek, Washington Post. He's had a couple of bestsellers, I'm pretty sure. One called Spin Cycle, if I remember correctly. He's written 5 books. I think he received multiple awards, including a National Press Club award for being an all-around good guy. Actually, it's for media criticism, which is kind of the same thing. Graduated University of Buffalo with a BA in English. We don't hold that against him. I got a BA in English, and it nearly ruined me. He also went to the Columbia School of Journalism. That is not the Columbia School that gives you 13 records for a penny. Howie, how are you?
I can't unsee the image of you in the shorty nightgown watching the show, but I'm glad to have you among the viewers. Great. If
you did unsee it, I would just send you a JPEG, so you'd have to look at it every single day.
Okay.
Yes. So I want to throw a bunch of theories out at you, and I want to see if you agree with me. I've noticed that if I say or do something that might be upsetting to viewers, no one really cares. But if you say something that might kind of tickle the fancy of the media reporters, that's a bigger deal. So it's almost, I feel as though people who work in this industry are more a slave to a select number of people who are just there to look for mistakes rather than actually thinking about the audience. And I maybe I just see that from my little what do you call this? My little filter, but my little bubble. But what do you think?
Bubble, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, people on Twitter care when you say things that offend them. I'm sure you've had some experience with that.
Never.
It is also true that there is a sort of a group of media reporters, pundits, bloviators, some of whom are very ideological, some of whom are very openly ideological, in a way that was not true when I was doing this a few years ago.
Exactly.
And they will spank you, and that's part of the job. Comes with the territory.
Okay, but now this is where I'm casually leading you to an interesting space, because I remember that the I guess if you'd call it industry types were not this ideological, and what happens when they're ideological, and it drives me crazy, and I think it happens on both sides too. They take whatever you say and they assume the worst possible intent from it. So the worst possible interpretation of what you're saying is what they believe, when in fact it might be a throwaway comment or a joke and you meant nothing. But what they do is in order to print something, you have to think of what could the worst possible thing he really meant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because that's exactly what many politicians say the media do to them, including one president of the United States.
Who might that be?
Take a phrase, wrench it out of contrast. You don't know that it was supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And then you're on the defensive, kind of arguing about, if you want to engage in this sort of thing, it can get very tail-chasing. But you're on the defensive trying to deny you didn't really mean that, here's what you really meant to say, and it can be a gigantic waste of time. And I agree that there are pundits and sort of attack dogs on both sides who do this. I do think this, and I thought this even before I came to work at Fox News, anything that's a little bit of a controversy, somebody, used the wrong word, the wrong phrase, or just said something dumb on Fox is considered to be 100,000 times more newsworthy than if it was said on MSNBC, CNN, Politico, you name it. Because Fox drives clicks and ratings. Fox is controversial. Fox is the biggest cable news network. And so there's a sort of a built-in incentive for these watchdogs to jump on Fox.
That is God, it is exactly – I hate that I agree with you, because this won't be a contentious –
We'll find something to fight about.
My gripe, and I've said this on The Five, I don't know, every week, is that the profit model now is about interpreting every comment in order to create a conflict, because the conflict is what's driving eyeballs on, let's say, MSNBC or CNN or any of the newspapers. It's you make money creating a polarity, a opposition, and so the only way you can do that is like find the tweet or take the thing out of context or do that or just try to create. Obviously, anti-Trumpism is a hell of a profit model. I know that the response to that would be, well, being pro-Trump is a profit model. I don't know about that. I think that, I'm for having a good time. I'm not for any side. Does that make sense?
Well, there's no question that in the age of Trump, he's sort of lifted all boats. Whether you hate Donald Trump or you love Donald Trump, everybody's ratings are up, everybody's clicks are up, and the president jokes about, well, when I'm gone, after you're going to go out of business, failing New York Times, and all of that. But the whole notion of looking, I call it selective outrage, looking for something that someone on the other side said, so you can just bash the hell out of them, and then kind of ignoring or explaining away or rationalizing something that someone on your side of the political aisle, the media aisle said, is the thing that gets to me, is the hypocrisy.
Right.
And also, sometimes, I'll do a show and I'll have a segment, and somebody will tweet something, and it'll be retweeted like 10,000 times, saying, you said X, and I said the opposite. I didn't say anything like it. And then, that people will say, you're just covering up. You're part of the resistance.
Yeah. To your point, too, like how Fox attracts more of this than other networks, I think that if Greg, me, and Joe from another network said exactly the same thing, right? But on the other network, the media would say, "Oh, he couldn't possibly mean that. It was a joke."
Right.
But for me, it would be, he meant this. So it is like it just depends where you are, and that then kind of reprograms how they're going to assign blame and how much outrage they're going to assign to it.
Right, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be criticism of Fox, and sometimes people at Fox make
never
part of my job.
Howie,
never.
There should be none.
Maybe not you.
Yes.
All right.
I should be immune.
But here's the thing. You know when I know it's going viral? When 7 o'clock in the morning, there's a string of sound bites on Morning Joe, and it's all Fox people. It's like Tucker, Laura, Hannity, look what Fox and Friends said. And so it's funny in a weird way, especially on certain days, and especially if someone at Fox has a big interview. Like, we provide the programming material for the others, and then they just bring on panels who, bloviate about it all day.
Yeah, Fox is like a restaurant. And you can make so many meals out of it, and serve it to the people who hate Fox. It's incredible. I did a story yesterday on the fake news T-shirt that was being sold at Bloomingdale's. Did you see that story at all? And how
I did not, but how shocking that somebody would try to make money on that.
Yeah, no, but so it was an ironic T-shirt, but actually 2 reporters tweeted about it, and Bloomingdale's removed the shirt because the reporters felt that those words, fake news, were somehow contributing to delegitimizing the press. So I think that as trite and cliched or I don't know, irritating the word fake news is, I think it might be the most refreshing thing that I've seen, because it's forcing the media to confront some of the things that they do, even if sometimes it's unfair. Because life is unfair, but at least it's getting them to acknowledge that they do things that are biased, and maybe they should be more careful. I don't know.
Well, maybe it has sparked a debate, but I think that, first of all, that President Trump has kind of overused it to the point where it kind of is drained of its meaning, because if everything is fake news and nothing is fake news, and he does put a lot of stories that he just doesn't happen to like, or which are proven to be true later if it's a leak, as fake news, and I think he can overuse that, and he is the President of the United States.
Right.
So I'm not wild about the term, but to the extent that it has forced famously thin-skinned journalists to say, hey, maybe we did really screw up that Covington Catholic High School story.
Exactly.
Maybe we did rush to judgment on some of these other things. That's healthy.
Exactly. That's my point. It's like it's like the media should not be complaining about hyper scrutiny when their entire job is hyper scrutiny. They have yelled all sorts of things about our military, about industry, about if you're rich, if you're in law enforcement. The media is not kind. So for them to say, "Hey, you guys can't call us out on our own problems," that is rich. And I say that
it's a bit of a double standard. There are journalists who own up, who apologize, who don't try to justify when they make a mistake or exaggerate something, or just we're hanging out there on a limb. But as I tell you, as a guy who often has to call for comment, too many are like, "Why are you picking on me? I'm not an elected official." Well, yeah, but you have a lot of power if you have a microphone, a printing press, or something like that.
Yeah, a common piece of wisdom. And most people don't know this, but they will know this maybe once in their life. It's if you want to know about fake news or an unfair media, become the subject of a story. I think that's when people realize, holy crap! So this is like if you read a magazine piece when you're like, okay, Greg Gutfeld read a magazine piece when he was in college, I would just assume everything they wrote about the Clash was 100% happened. And then as I got older and I became the object of magazine pieces or actually whatever, newspaper pieces, I'd go, wait, that didn't happen. This didn't happen. That was a joke. And I'd go like, holy crap. And I think, in this day and age, as people become on social media, become vulnerable for saying, they get the spotlight on them, more and more people are learning what it's like to be under scrutiny and your story being smushed.
Yeah, I happen to think that it's actually healthy for every single reporter or journalist or commentator to go through that once where you are the story, because you do see the oversimplification, the unfairness, and maybe it gives you a little more appreciation into the fact that, when we fire at a lot of these people, like, they're human beings, they have families. Sometimes we just sort of lack a certain degree of compassion. We just demonize them, we vilify them. And I think even for ordinary people who can get caught up in the Twitter wars, being on the receiving end hopefully would give you a little bit more hesitance to start the circling fire squad.
Yeah, I when I worked in magazines, people had written about me, and I didn't complain at all because a lot of times what wasn't true was flattering. You
never complain about that.
Yes, you never complain about flattering. If the fake news was flattering, Howie, I'd be all for it. But it's not. Yeah. I think the media also has an unfair luxury of introducing stories that fall apart, but they count on the public just moving on with them, and they won't remember it. And I think of just recently the BuzzFeed story just kind of came and went, right? It was like they had these sources, and then it all fell apart when Mueller, and then it just kind of disappeared, and everybody was on BuzzFeed's case for a couple of days, but then that just kind of then they laid off workers and now we're on to something else, another BuzzFeed story,
I think that's a product of the hyperspeed news culture that was already gearing up before Trump took office, but now, the guy just makes news 85 times a day. Yeah. And so good stories also fade very quickly if he does something right or somebody did something good, but the bad stories, the outrage meter goes to 11. Everybody goes crazy. By the next morning, it's like, Ralph Northam, what did he do again? Who really cares about that?
Yeah, yeah. It's
blackface?
It is incredible how quickly we move on now, because it feels like I've said this about Trump. In the Trump administration, it's like dog years. So it's like he packs 7 years of media into 1 year. It's incredible how much stuff. There's like 3 or 4 stories a day when there used to be like one story. I'm trying to think about how we packed the 5 before Trump. What stories were we doing? I can't even remember. I guess we were doing Obama story in the A block, and then we'd have to find something else. But it was like with Trump, you get like 3 slices of pie a day, and not one.
Yeah. I have to tear up the show several times a week now just to become par for the course. And the things that seem like they were threatening to plan it on Monday, by Sunday it's like, that was 6 scandals ago.
Yeah.
And also this rate, it's destructive in 2 ways. First of all, I'm tired all the time, so let's get that on the table.
Poor secondly, Howie's tired, everybody.
I made some news. And secondly, we all have less time to report, to think, to ponder, things that are kind of essential elements of journalism because, hey, I went out to lunch and I came back and he tweeted and I got to jump on this, you know the drill.
Yeah, and that's why it's important, and I learned this in the 2016 races, that to spend more time away from people in your business, because it's amazing how little life changes for everybody else. Like we're thinking we're on this giant ship going through this crazy ocean every day, but then you go and you talk to your brother-in-law or you talk to your and they're like, hey, yeah, well, they might feel that way about the Lakers, they might feel that way about a sports team, but they're not even remotely as connected to this stuff. And I think for us, it may be a little bit of we might be out of proportion away. You know what?
Yeah, they have lives, and
yes,
our life
and
is unfortunately wrapped up in this bubble.
We don't have lives. That's the problem. I'm speaking.
The ugly truth comes out.
Exactly. You know what? The other thing I noticed in media blogs, and I see this. I don't know if it's Huffington Post or Mediaite or wherever. Whenever a liberal criticizes a conservative, the headline's always really positive. They use the phrases like, he torches, he schools, he shuts down. But then in the reverse, when a conservative schools a liberal, it's he pounces, he smears, he melts down. I mean, it is so obvious how biased it is, but they keep doing it.
Well, a really classic example of that was what Virginia Governor Ralph Northam was involved in before the blackface controversy, which was his really incendiary comments about late-term abortion and aborting a child on the day it was being born and so forth. And it was fascinating to me because the New York Times and the Washington Post, most of the networks simply ignored it. It was not news by their definition. The Times and the Post both had stories that said GOP pounces on Northam remarks with aim of making a 2020 issue. In other words, what he said, you could debate it, pro or con, but what he said was not news. It was the Republicans were exploiting it.
Yes.
And that goes to your point about the loaded verbs.
And in fact, there is a debate over. I see. My feeling on Northam was that he was answering the wrong question. He was talking about. I was talking about this with a doctor recently that he answered that question terribly, but he was talking about it as a pediatrician dealing with a non-viable infant, and that was not what the question was about. So it made it sound like he was talking about aborting a healthy baby, and he was so stupid that he didn't even understand. I think Northam might be just a really dumb person because everything he does.
Well, in fairness, he almost moonwalked, but he didn't moonwalk.
Yeah, that's true. You know what though? That if he had moonwalked, that would have been genius because that would have been another week about talking about something completely different. Anyway, but that was God, jeez. So I don't even know where that's going. But anyway, so I have my theory, and I, as you can tell, I think I've gotten more and more anti-media as I get older, and I believe that I came up with this phrase. I think I did called the prison of two ideas, and I think the media wants us, the consumers, to be in only two ideas. Either you're for something or against it. It can only be there are only two prison cells.
Right.
And you can't be in any other space. On immigration, like you can't have if you have a nuanced take on immigration, that doesn't sell. If you have any kind of nuanced approach to prison reform or drugs, that doesn't sell. The profit model is the prison of two ideas, team sports. Right?
Well, and I think many of us are complicit in that because you see endless panel segments on cable. It's like somebody's pro, somebody's con, somebody's Democrat, somebody's Republican. It doesn't leave much space for that middle thing. But what I'm really getting from this podcast, Greg, is that you are feeling liberated because you can talk at length and not be cut off by Juan, Dana. This is great. This is therapy for you.
Yes, exactly. Why podcasts? I don't know if podcasts are better for the podcaster or the people who listen to them, but it just allows it allows me to sit here and rant, and Dana's not talking about her dog, and Juan's not saying guess what, Greg. So yeah, you're absolutely right. But I mean, that's
why I've started podcasting too. It is liberating.
When is your podcast?
We do it every day. You can get it at foxnewspodcast.com.
How come I don't know that?
Usual places.
I've never. You know what?
Because I need a better PR person.
You did. No, you do. You need. I'm going to tell everybody to go check out Howie's podcast. I'm sure it's very good. What do you talk about? The media?
It's called Media Buzz Meter, and we picked 5 buzziest or most important or craziest stories and just talk about the treatment of it. And then sometimes we just riff, or I'll talk about how bad the Super Bowl was. Can
I ask you one more question before I go? This is like in Columbo. Just one more question. My wife is a big fan of yours. I was wondering if you'd sign this picture. The story that nobody's talking about is the Smollett story, which I think actually shows a lot of patience that is never shown with anything else. It's like Covington's a perfect example of like jumping in and just devouring a story, and I'll even include myself in this by mistake, making an error. But with the Smollett story, it's like. This person, because he is an alleged victim, is afforded a lot of space, and no one's talking about it. I think he's going to be doing Robin Roberts' show that it might have already been pre-taped, but it's going to air tomorrow, I think. But I find it like it's almost been 3 weeks, and how do you – okay, I guess my point is how do you approach a story in which nothing can be proven or disproven?
Yeah, that's the dilemma. And I've looked, like everyone else, I'm sort of suspicious. There's a lot of details that don't seem to add up. I've looked at it a couple of times, and I felt like there were enough holes in the story that it could plausibly have happened, even though a lot of signs indicate that it didn't happen. And I think actually this is a case where, and maybe it's because the guy's a big star, but where the media showed restraint rather than sort of making him prove a negative. I mean, this will all come out, and when it comes out, it's going to be huge. But imagine if we showed that kind of restraint on other allegations that were unproven.
Exactly. I think that he was the beneficiary of restraint because of the intersectionality of he's black, he's gay, and liberal, and he hates Trump. And I think he's afforded a luxury that a lot of other like a Covington kid would not get this kind of restraint. But I don't know where it's going to go. I'm looking forward to seeing this interview and just seeing how he speaks about it, because I always feel like you can see something that when you see somebody talking about something. And all right, Howie, media buzz.
11 Eastern on the Fox News channel. Greg, it's been real.
It has been real. I don't know what that means. I don't even know if that's a compliment. It's been real. I think that's kind of an evasive phrase that's value free. It's been real.
It's been a lot of fun.
Has it really? You're trying to get off the phone, aren't you? You have to go somewhere.
Don't you have a show to do or something?
No. I'm going to keep you on here just because I know that you're trying to get somewhere. I can tell that you're trying to shoo me off the phone. This is the first time in a podcast where somebody's going, I got to get going.
Are you music is playing.
We don't have music, Howie. There's no music. It's in your brain. It's in your head. No, this is just part 1 of the podcast. I've got another 60 questions.
RCA Victor Television. One more day to Labor Day weekend, the traditional occasion for tasty outdoor barbecues or picnics.
are between me and
Times Square, 42nd Street.
Transfer is available. 1-7-8.
Street.